The first VEC harvester ship blotted out the sun over New York City like a cancerous growth, its hull stretching 15 miles from tip to tail. Commander Jake Turner pressed his face against the reinforced glass of the Pentagon's observation deck, watching as smaller craft peeled away from the mother ship like parasites seeking fresh blood. "Sir, we're getting reports from every major population center." Lieutenant Beck's voice cracked with barely controlled panic. "London, Tokyo, Moscow, they're all under the same shadow." Jake's jaw tightened as he watched the alien craft descend with mechanical precision. No communication attempts, no demands for surrender, no dramatic speeches about galactic dominion. The VEC had arrived with the cold efficiency of exterminators coming to clear out an infestation. The first mining beam carved through Manhattan's skyline like a scalpel through flesh. Buildings didn't explode or crumble, they simply ceased to exist, their matter converted into streams of raw energy that flowed upward into the harvester's collection arrays. Jake watched 1,000 years of human achievement vanish in seconds, reduced to fuel for alien machines. "Get me General Morrison." Jake barked, never taking his eyes off the systematic destruction. "And patch me through to NORAD. I want every nuclear submarine captain on secure channels in 5 minutes." The lieutenant hesitated. "Sir, early reports suggest our conventional weapons aren't even registering on their sensors." The Navy launched everything they had at the Pacific Harvester. Missiles just passed through some kind of energy field. Jake's knuckles went white against the glass. He'd spent 30 years climbing the military ladder, fought in 3 different conflicts, earned medals for tactical brilliance under impossible odds. None of it mattered now. Humanity's greatest weapons were toys against technology that treated matter itself as a renewable resource. "Then we go underground," he said, his voice carrying the weight of species-level determination. "Signal all bunker complexes. Initialize Deep Protocol 7. If they want to strip mine our planet, they'll have to dig us out first." 3,000 miles away, Dr. Lisa Ward hunched over a bank of quantum computers in the Cheyenne Mountain Research Complex, her fingers dancing across holographic displays with manic intensity. Around her, the underground facility hummed with desperate activity as humanity's greatest scientific minds worked to understand an enemy that operated beyond the laws of physics as they knew them. "The energy signature is impossible," she muttered, analyzing data from the failed missile strikes. "They're not just using advanced technology, they're rewriting local spacetime to make our weapons irrelevant." Her research partner, Dr. Mike Chun, looked up from his own workstation with haunted eyes. "Lisa, the casualty reports are coming in. 40 million people in the first hour. They're not killing us, they're converting us. Every human caught in those mining beams becomes part of their energy collection." Lisa felt something cold and sharp crystallize in her chest. Not fear that would come later, in the quiet moments between calculations. This was something else, something uniquely human that the VEC couldn't possibly understand. It was the moment when a species looked extinction in the face and decided to bite back. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Sci-fi stellar conflict is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you're hungry for HFY battles and tales of human valor against alien might, hit subscribe, it's free, and it helps us bring these front lines to you. She pulled up the emergency protocols that had been theoretical nightmares just days ago. Project Prometheus, the weaponization of Earth's own geological and magnetic systems. Project Pandora, the creation of quantum cascade weapons that could theoretically destabilize matter at the subatomic level. Projects that had been shelved as too dangerous, too unpredictable, too likely to destroy the very planet they were meant to protect. "Mike," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was about to propose, "how quickly can we retrofit the Large Hadron Collider for military applications?" He stared at her as if she'd suggested juggling antimatter. "Lisa, that's insane. The power requirements alone would drain half the eastern seaboard, and if we miscalculate the particle beam intensity, then we miscalculate," she cut him off. "Because right now, the alternative is watching our entire species get processed into alien fuel. They think we're primitive. They think we're helpless." Her eyes gleamed with the kind of dangerous inspiration that had driven humans to split atoms and reach for the stars. Let's show them exactly how creative we can be when cornered. Above them, the harvester ships continued their methodical consumption of human civilization, their alien operators confident in their technological superiority. They had done this to 1,000 worlds, processed 1,000,000 species into useful energy. The small, violent primates on this particular rock would be no different from the rest. They were about to learn why that assumption would be their first and last mistake. 6 months after the sky bled metal, humanity had become a species of moles. The vast tunnel networks that had once served as subway systems and emergency bunkers now housed the remnants of 8 billion souls, connected by fiber optic cables and powered by geothermal taps that the VEC couldn't detect from orbit. Commander Jake Turner stood in what had once been the British Museum's basement, now serving as a command center for European resistance operations. The irony wasn't lost on him. Artifacts of human history surrounded maps showing the systematic destruction of human cities. Ancient pottery shared shelf space with quantum communication devices, while Egyptian sarcophagi had been converted into server farms running continuous analysis of alien technology. "Report," Jake said as Colonel Emma Price approached with a data pad that glowed softly in the artificial twilight of their underground world. "Mixed news, sir. The Melbourne operation was a complete success. Dr. Ward's quantum disruptors took out an entire mining platform, first confirmed kill of a VEC harvester drone, but we lost the entire strike team. The aliens' response was ... excessive." Jake nodded grimly. They'd learned that lesson the hard way. Every successful human attack prompted the VEC to glass another square mile of surface territory, even though nothing lived there anymore. The aliens were methodical in their cruelty, using human psychology against itself. And the supply situation? Better than expected. Turns out the VEC only harvest organized matter. All our scattered supply caches read as natural mineral deposits. To their sensors, we can keep fighting for years if necessary. If necessary. Jake almost laughed at the phrase. It would be necessary, because humanity had discovered something that chilled them to the bone. The VEC weren't just strip mining Earth for resources, they were preparing it for complete planetary disassembly. Geological surveys suggested they planned to crack the planet's crust and harvest the molten core itself. "Sir," Lieutenant Beck's voice crackled over the comm system, "Dr. Ward is requesting immediate consultation. She says it's about the weapon test." Jake made his way through corridors lined with hydroponic farms and workshops, where human engineers reverse-engineered alien technology with tools made from melted-down wedding rings and family heirlooms. The smell of ozone and desperation permeated everything, but underneath it all was something else, the sharp scent of human ingenuity under pressure. Dr. Lisa Ward looked like she hadn't slept in weeks, which was probably accurate. Her laboratory had expanded to fill an entire section of the tunnel complex, with holographic displays showing particle cascades and energy matrices that hurt to look at directly. "Jake, we've done it," she said without preamble. "The quantum disruptor field isn't just a weapon, it's a key. We've figured out how their technology works." She gestured to a 3-dimensional model rotating slowly in the air between them. The VEC use something they call quantum-locked energy matrices. Every piece of their technology is connected to every other piece through quantum entanglement. It makes them incredibly efficient, but it also makes them vulnerable. Jake studied the display, recognizing tactical possibilities even in technology that operated beyond his understanding. Vulnerable how? If we can destabilize the quantum lock on one major system, the cascade effect will propagate through their entire network. Not just the ships in orbit, every VEC facility, every piece of technology they've ever built. The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. "You're talking about wiping out their entire civilization." Lisa's expression didn't change. "They're talking about wiping out ours. The difference is, we're going to do it first." She pulled up another display showing energy readings from across the globe. "But there's a problem. Creating a quantum cascade of that magnitude requires more power than our entire planet generates. We need something bigger." "How much bigger?" "Planetary core level bigger. We need to turn Earth itself into a weapon." Jake stared at the readings, understanding dawning like sunrise after the longest night. The tectonic manipulation research. You want to weaponize the planet's geological systems. Not just the geological systems. The magnetic field, the atmospheric electrical charge, the rotational energy, everything. We're going to turn our entire world into the largest directed energy weapon ever conceived. The silence stretched between them as Jake processed the magnitude of what she was proposing. It was insane, impossible, and probably suicidal. It was also the first plan anyone had presented that actually stood a chance of working. What do you need? Lisa's smile was sharp enough to cut alien hull plating. Access to every nuclear reactor on the planet, control of the global power grid, and about 72 hours to recalibrate everything we know about physics. And if it works? If it works, we don't just drive the VEC away from Earth, we follow them home and show them what happens when you threaten a species that learned to split atoms before it learned to leave its own atmosphere. Jake looked around the laboratory, at the human faces bent over alien technology, at the children who had grown up in tunnels learning mathematics from equations stolen from their oppressors. Humanity had been reduced to hiding in holes, but those holes had become forges where the deadliest weapons in the galaxy were being born. Do it, he said. And may whatever gods the Veek worship have mercy on them, because we won't. The morning Earth declared war on the heavens, began like any other in the underground cities that honeycombed the planet's crust. Children attended school in converted subway cars, their lessons illuminated by captured VEC lighting systems. Engineers crafted improvised weapons from alien technology and human desperation in workshops that had once been shopping malls. And in a command center buried 2 miles beneath what used to be Denver, Dr. Lisa Ward made final preparations for humanity's first real counterattack. All stations report ready, Colonel Emma Price announced from her position at the tactical display. Around the world, resistance cells had positioned themselves at critical infrastructure points, power stations, geological monitoring sites, and the massive particle accelerators that would serve as focusing arrays for what was about to happen. Commander Jake Turner stood beside the main control panel, his hand hovering over the activation switch. 3 years of preparation, 1,000 failed experiments, and the concentrated fury of a species pushed to the brink had led to this moment. The quantum cascade weapon wasn't just a gun, it was Earth itself, transformed into a directed energy system capable of destabilizing matter at the subatomic level. Dr. Ward, final systems check, Jake ordered. Lisa's fingers danced over holographic controls that merged human engineering with reverse-engineered VEC technology. Tectonic amplifiers online. We're reading seismic resonance across 47 major fault lines. Magnetic field generators at maximum output were essentially turning the planet into a massive electromagnetic coil. She paused, checking readings that would have been considered impossible just 5 years earlier. Nuclear power stations are feeding power into the global grid faster than they've ever operated. If this doesn't work, we'll have turned Earth into a radioactive wasteland for nothing. And if it does work? If it does work, the Veek are about to learn why humans are the only species that ever figured out how to make rocks fight back. Jake's cum crackled with reports from around the globe. Resistance fighters in the Australian tunnels confirmed their quantum disruptors were locked onto Veek mining platforms. Teams in the Siberian bunkers reported successful tap-ins to the planetary magnetic field generators. From the depths of the Pacific, submarine crews announced they were in position to coordinate oceanic resonance patterns. "Sir," Lieutenant Beck called from the communications station, "we're getting movement from the VEC fleet. They're repositioning into defensive formations." Lisa looked up from her displays with surprise. They know, somehow they've detected the energy buildup. The tactical display showed the massive harvester ships breaking their methodical mining patterns for the first time in 3 years. Smaller craft swarmed around the capital ships like antibodies responding to an infection. And new energy signatures suggested they were powering weapon systems that had never been used in Earth's vicinity. "They're scared," Jake realized with savage satisfaction. "For the first time since they arrived, they're actually afraid of us." A new voice cut through the cum chatter translated Veek speech, intercepted from their command frequencies. The translation software, built from captured communication arrays, rendered the alien words in flat, mechanical tones. The inferior species demonstrates unexpected capability. Recommend immediate planetary sterilization before they can complete unknown weapon system. Jake felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. They're going to try to kill the planet. Before we can fire. Let them try, Lisa said, her voice carrying the weight of human defiance distilled into pure determination. Fire the quantum cascade. All stations, execute protocol Prometheus on my mark. The countdown began, each second marked by the coordinated pulse of fusion reactors, particle accelerators, and tectonic manipulation systems across the globe. Earth itself began to vibrate at frequencies that had never existed in nature, its magnetic field shifting into configurations that turned the entire planet into a weapon of unprecedented scale. 5.4.3.2 Mark. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Every piece of VEC technology in Earth's orbital space suddenly began to malfunction as quantum locks destabilized in cascading waves. Harvester ships that had operated with perfect efficiency for decades found their matter conversion beams turning inward, their own hulls becoming fuel for runaway reactions, but the VEC response was swift and brutal. Planetary bombardment lances that had been held in reserve now fired in desperation, carving through Earth's atmosphere in beams of annihilation that could melt continents. The first strike vaporized what remained of the Amazon basin. The second turned the Sahara Desert into a glass crater that glowed with residual energy. Damage reports coming in from all sectors, Colonel Price called out. But Jake looked at the orbital display. On the screen, VEC ships were dying. Not just damaged or disabled, but experiencing complete structural failure as their quantum-entangled systems collapsed in cascade reactions. The largest harvester ship broke apart in a chain of explosions that lit up the night sky like a second sun, its debris raining down in meteors that streaked across continents. "It's working," Lisa whispered, then louder. "It's actually working." But even as the first wave of VEC ships died, new contacts appeared at the edge of the solar system. Reinforcements arriving through faster-than-light transit, more ships than had been in the original invasion fleet. Jake studied the tactical display with the eyes of a career military officer. They're not just bringing reinforcements. They're bringing everything they have. Lisa pulled up long-range sensor data, her expression shifting from triumph to grim determination. "Jake, that's not a reinforcement fleet. Those are planetary cracker ships designed to break worlds apart for deep-core mining. They're not planning to occupy Earth anymore. They're planning to destroy it completely." The celebration in the command center died as the implications sank in. Humanity had won its first real victory against the VEC, but in doing so, they had escalated the conflict beyond any possibility of surrender or negotiation. The aliens were coming to end not just human civilization, but the planet itself. Jake looked around at the faces of the people who had spent 3 years preparing for this moment, scientists who had weaponized physics itself, engineers who had turned a world into a gun, soldiers who had learned to fight with technologies that rewrote the laws of nature. "Well," he said, his voice carrying the weight of species-level determination, "they want to crack planets? Let's show them what happens when the planet cracks back." The VEC planetary cracker fleet arrived 6 months later, their ships bristling with technology designed to tear worlds apart from the inside out. Commander Jake Turner watched from the primary command bunker as massive vessels, each one large enough to blot out entire states, took positions around Earth like surgeons preparing for dissection. "They're not even bothering with orbital bombardment this time," Dr. Lisa Ward observed, studying the tactical displays with eyes that had grown hard over years of underground warfare. "Those ships are designed for one purpose: crack the planetary crust and harvest the molten core." Jake nodded grimly. "How long?" "Based on the energy signatures, maybe 72 hours. They'll use resonance mining to destabilize the tectonic plates, then inject plasma charges into the mantle. The continents will break apart like ice flows." Around them, the command center hummed with desperate activity. 3 years of living underground had transformed humanity into something the VEC couldn't have anticipated, a species that had learned to think like their planet, to fight with geological timescales and forces that dwarfed any conventional military Status report on Project Gaia, Jake ordered. Colonel Emma Price consulted her displays, where data flowed from monitoring stations buried in every major fault line on Earth. All tectonic amplifiers are online. Magnetic field generators are at maximum output. We've turned the entire planetary core into a resonance chamber. Lisa pulled up a three-dimensional model of Earth that glowed with energy signatures invisible to Veek sensors. Jake, what we've built down here isn't just a weapon, it's evolution. We've turned our world into a living system that can defend itself. The plan was insane even by the standards of a species that had already weaponized plate tectonics. Using the same quantum cascade technology that had destroyed the first Vec fleet, they had created a network of resonance nodes throughout Earth's crust and mantle. The planet itself would become a directed energy weapon on a scale that dwarfed anything ever conceived. "Sir," Lieutenant Beck called from the communications station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Vec fleet. It's in English." The main display flickered to life, showing a Vec commander whose crystalline exoskeleton gleamed with bioluminescent patterns that suggested either rage or admiration. The translation came through in mechanical tones, but the meaning was unmistakable. "Inferior. Species designation human. Your resistance capabilities exceed predictive models. This communication serves as final opportunity for survival. Cease defensive preparations and accept processing into useful matter. Planetary sterilization protocols will commence in local measurement 72 time units regardless of compliance." Jake looked around the command center at faces that had grown lean and hard during years of underground warfare. Children who had learned calculus by studying alien technology. Engineers who had become artists of destruction, crafting weapons from the fundamental forces of reality itself. "Send a reply," he said quietly. The transmission focused on Jake's weathered face, scarred by years of tunnel warfare and marked by the kind of determination that had driven humans to split atoms and reach for stars. "Vec Fleet Commander, this is Commander Jake Turner, speaking for the human species. You came to our world seeking resources to harvest. You found something else entirely, a species that learned to fight with the forces that forge galaxies. You want to crack our planet? Come try, but understand this. We've spent 3 years turning Earth itself into a weapon. When we're done with you, there won't be enough left of your fleet to fuel a cooking fire." The Vec commander's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what the translation software identified as confusion mixed with predatory interest. "Your species demonstrates unexpected capability. This makes processing more interesting. Planetary. Cracking sequence initiates now." The transmission ended, and immediately, every sensor on Earth registered the beginning of the most violent geological event in planetary history. The Vec ships fired resonance beams into the ocean floors, targeting the stress points where tectonic plates met. The intent was to fracture the crust and expose the molten mantle for harvesting. Instead, they found themselves fighting a planet that had learned to punch back. "Tectonic amplifiers responding," Lisa reported, her voice tight with concentration. "We're reading seismic activity along every major fault line, but it's controlled. The resonance dampers are working." On the displays, Earth's geological structure revealed the full scope of human engineering. Every earthquake had been channeled through networks of quantum-stabilized tunnels that turned seismic energy into directed force. Every volcanic eruption had been focused through magnetic field manipulators that could launch molten rock at orbital velocities. "My God," Colonel Price whispered, watching the real-time seismic data. "We've turned the entire ring of fire into an artillery battery." The first Vec planetary cracker discovered this when Mount Vesuvius erupted with the focused intensity of a stellar flare, launching a stream of superheated plasma that punched through the ship's hull like a lance through paper. The explosion lit up the night sky across 3 continents, and debris rained down in meteors that carved new craters from Italy to North Africa. But the Vec adapted quickly. Their remaining ships adjusted position, using gravitational manipulation to deflect the volcanic bombardment while increasing the intensity of their resonance mining. The planet shuddered under forces that could shatter worlds, and even with human engineering, the crust began to show stress fractures. "They're learning our tricks," Jake observed. "Time for something they can't adapt to." Lisa's smile was sharp. Enough to cut alien hull plating. Initiate Protocol Atlas. Let's show them what happens when a planet decides to leave its orbit. The command propagated through networks that spanned continents, reaching quantum processors buried in the deepest trenches of every ocean. For a moment that stretched across geological time, every atom in Earth's crust resonated at the same frequency. The planet's magnetic field shifted into a configuration that had never existed in nature, turning the entire world into an electromagnetic railgun the size of a celestial body. Earth moved, not much, barely a few thousand miles from its established orbit, but enough to shatter every calculation the VEC had made about planetary physics. Their gravitational manipulators, designed to hold worlds steady for efficient mining, found themselves wrestling with forces that operated on galactic scales. VEC fleet is breaking formation, Colonel Price reported with savage satisfaction. Their gravitational anchors can't compensate for a planet that fights back. Jake watched the tactical display as ships designed to harvest worlds found themselves outmaneuvered by the world they had come to harvest. It was beautiful in the way that only absolute victory could be beautiful, the moment when the hunted became the hunter, when the prey revealed that it had always been the predator. "Sir," Lieutenant Beck called, "we're getting new contacts at the edge of the system. More VEC ships incoming." Jake studied the sensor data with the eyes of a tactician who had learned to think in planetary terms. "How many?" "Thousands, sir." "It looks like their entire fleet." Lisa looked up from her displays, her expression shifting from triumph to the kind of grim determination that had carried humanity through 3 years of underground warfare. "Jake, they're not coming to harvest anymore. Those are warships, pure military vessels designed for one purpose, which is complete species elimination. They've decided we're too dangerous to process. Now they just want us dead." Jake nodded slowly, understanding the compliment buried in that alien decision. Humanity had become something unprecedented. In VEC experience, a species that couldn't be harvested, conquered, or controlled. The only option left was annihilation. "Well," he said, his voice carrying the weight of species-level defiance, "they're welcome to try. But first, let's follow these planet crackers home and show them what we've learned about planetary engineering." The human fleet that departed Earth 6 months later bore little resemblance to anything that had ever sailed between stars. Built from reverse-engineered VEC technology and powered by quantum cascade reactors that turned matter into pure energy, the ships were less vessels than weaponized asteroids, chunks of Earth's crust fitted with engines and armed with the collective fury of a species that had learned to think in geological terms. Commander Jake Turner stood on the bridge of the flagship Defiance, watching the VEC home system grow larger on displays that showed wavelengths beyond human perception. The star was older than Sol, surrounded by a ring of stripped worlds that bore the scars of industrial-scale mining. But at the center, the VEC homeworld gleamed with the accumulated wealth of 1,000 conquered civilizations. "Long-range sensors confirm intelligence reports," Dr. Lisa Ward announced from the science station. "Population in the billions, all concentrated on the primary world. Secondary planets are mining and manufacturing centers, but the main population is sitting on what amounts to a fortress world." Jake nodded, studying tactical displays that showed defense networks spanning entire solar systems. The VEC had built their home into something unprecedented, a world-sized weapon capable of sterilizing entire fleets before they could achieve orbital insertion. "They've never had to defend against anything like us," he observed. "Every species they've encountered has been limited by conventional physics. They build defenses against ships and missiles, not against opponents who can weaponize planetary cores." The human fleet had grown during the journey between stars. Every asteroid and comet they passed had been converted into a weapon platform. Every bit of interstellar debris transformed into ammunition for the war that was coming. Humanity had become a nomadic weapons manufacturer, turning the void itself into an arsenal. "Sir," Captain Mike Ross called from the tactical station, "VEC defensive fleet is moving to intercept. Estimate contact in 6 hours." Jake smiled with the kind of cold satisfaction that came from years of underground warfare. "Signal all ships. Implement scorched earth protocols. If they want to see what humans learned about planetary engineering, Let's give them the full demonstration. The battle began at the edge of the system, where weak defense platforms, each one the size of a small moon, opened fire with weapons that could boil oceans. Humanity's response was to throw asteroids at them. Not small ones, chunks of rock and ice the size of cities, accelerated to significant fractions of light speed and guided by quantum targeting systems that made evasion impossible. First defensive ring is down, Colonel Emma Price reported with professional satisfaction. VEC command vessels are falling back to secondary positions. But Jake's attention was focused on something else, the data flowing from long-range scanners as they penetrated deeper into the VEC system. What they found there changed everything humanity thought they knew about their enemies. "Lisa, are you seeing this?" he asked quietly. Dr. Ward's face had gone pale as the implications sank in. "Jake, those aren't just mining operations. The VEC haven't been harvesting resources, they've been harvesting civilizations. Every species they've conquered, they've preserved in quantum storage matrices." The display showed the truth in stark detail. Billions of sentient beings from across the galaxy, held in suspended animation within crystalline matrices that powered VEC technology. The aliens weren't just strip miners, they were slavers operating on a galactic scale, using the life force of conquered peoples to fuel their expansion. "How many?" Jake asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Conservative estimate? Trillions. Every species the VEC have encountered over the past millennium, reduced to battery power for their war machine." The revelation hit the human fleet like a physical blow. This wasn't just a war for survival, it was a war for the soul of the galaxy itself. Every VEC ship they had destroyed, every victory they had won, had been powered by the enslaved consciousness of people who had faced the same choice humanity now faced. "All ships, this is Admiral Turner," Jake announced, his voice carrying across the quantum communication networks that linked the human fleet. "New intelligence reveals the true nature of our enemy. The VEC aren't just trying to destroy us, they're trying to enslave every thinking being in the galaxy. Today, we don't just fight for humanity. We fight for everyone who ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of freedom." The final assault on the VEC homeworld began with humanity doing what it had always done best, the impossible. Instead of attacking the planet directly, the human fleet surrounded it with a ring of asteroids fitted with quantum cascade generators. Not to destroy the world, but to destabilize the massive quantum storage matrices that held trillions of enslaved minds. "Cascade generators are online," Lisa reported. "We're reading quantum resonance signatures from every major population center. When we fire, every storage matrix on the planet will destabilize simultaneously." Jake looked around the bridge at faces that had grown hard during years of underground warfare, at people who had learned to weaponize physics itself in defense of their species. They had come so far from the frightened survivors who had huddled in tunnels, while alien harvesters strip-mined their world. "Dr. Ward, what happens to all those imprisoned minds when the matrices destabilize?" Lisa's smile was sharp enough to cut starlight. "They wake up, Jake. Every species the VEC have enslaved over the past 1,000 years wakes up simultaneously, on a planet where they outnumber their captors by several million to one." The quantum cascade fired, and the VEC homeworld began to die, not from external bombardment, but from internal revolution, as trillions of enslaved beings discovered they were free for the first time in centuries. The uprising lasted 3 days and nights, visible from orbit as cities burned and the crystal spires of VEC civilization crumbled under the weight of galactic justice. When it was over, the VEC were extinct, not destroyed by human weapons, but consumed by the fury of every species they had ever conquered. The storage matrices that had powered their technology became monuments to liberation, broadcasting the news of freedom across quantum networks that spanned the galaxy. Jake stood on the observation deck of the Defiance, watching as representatives from 1,000 freed civilizations gathered in the ruins of the VEC homeworld. Humanity had come to this system as refugees seeking revenge. They were leaving as the founders of something unprecedented, a galactic alliance built on the principle that no species should ever again face extinction alone. "So what now?" Lisa asked, joining him at the viewport. Jake smiled, thinking of Earth and the tunnels where humanity had learned to fight with forces that forged galaxies. Now we go home, but we're not the same species that left. We're the ones who taught the galaxy that being small doesn't mean being helpless, that being primitive doesn't mean being prey. He gestured toward the gathered fleet human ships flying alongside vessels from civilizations that had been myths until today, all united by the simple truth that freedom was worth any price. We're the species that turned a planet into a weapon, that made the void itself into an ally. We're the ones who looked at impossible odds and decided to change the definition of impossible. The human fleet departed the Vex system not as conquerors, but as liberators. Behind them, the ruins of an empire that had enslaved galaxies became the foundation for something new, a civilization, built on the principle that had driven humanity from their first underground tunnel to the stars themselves. Some species were born to rule, others were born to serve. But humanity had proven something far more dangerous, that some species were born to ensure that no one ruled and no one served, that freedom itself was the only law that mattered among the stars. The galaxy would never be the same. And that, Jake reflected as Earth grew large in the viewports, was exactly the point.